Hi, let's do a March wrap up. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. On this book, we talk about books and writing, and if that sounds fun, hit the subscribe button and hang out. I apologize, it's extremely dark. We are having a very severe thunderstorm right now. It's gonna get really bad in about 15 minutes, but I think I can get my filming done in under 15 minutes. We'll see. And if I suddenly disappear and change clothes, it's because I'm sitting next to a very big window and we are forecasted to have ping pong size hail. But all my kids are currently at school, hopefully away from windows. So I thought I should probably get my filming done if I can. To begin, I had a phenomenal reading month in March. So many of these books I think are going to be books of the year picks at the end of the year because it was just like I don't really rate by stars, but they were all 4 or 5 star reads. Fantastic. Couple pieces of housekeeping. If you want to sign up for my newsletter, there'll be a link in the description. I do mini book reviews in there, and also it keeps you up to date with all my writing stuff, and I have a lot of writing stuff going on in the next couple months. So if you are here to follow along on that, definitely subscribe to my newsletter. It also comes with a free copy of The Forest Witch, which is a short paranormal romance about a witch and a warlock in the Pacific Northwest one rainy weekend. So there is a book on this list that was on my April TBR, and there's a book that I thought was going to be on this that will not be because I finished reading on April 1st, and that is because we went on vacation with our family, which was very nice, and we went to a state park, a little bit in the middle of nowhere, and one of our children decided to be a little extra and get scarlet fever while we were there. And she is okay now. And thankfully there was a really good regional hospital system, only 45 minutes away, which was very lucky. And she feels better. But I did spend a lot of the vacation in the dark holding a 5-year-old rather than out in the light reading my hardcover book. So I ended up reading 2 Kindle books on my vacation when I had originally planned to read 1 Kindle and 1 hard copy book. I just noticed you can see just the dead corner of this plant. Let's turn it around so you can see that it's also very alive over here as I hit myself in the face with a palm. That's a little better, right? Okay. In my April TBR video, I did not tell you what I was going to pick from Book of the Month because of the way the week fell. So I said I'd tell you in this video. So my April pick was Advika and the Hollywood Wives by Kirthana Rimisetti, I believe is how you say her last name. This is all I picked. Usually I pick 2 or 3 books, but you know what? I wasn't super drawn to any of the books, and I knew I wanted to pick one, so I looked at what was offered, and I've been on a little bit of a contemporary fiction kick. So this is about a woman who's married to a Hollywood playboy who's a lot older than her, and one of his exes dies and says she's going to give his current wife a ton of money if she divorces him. That sounded like a lot of fun and something that I would enjoy reading, so I grabbed that for April. Now let's talk about everything I read in March. The first book I read in March was Mame by Jessica George. Oh my gosh. Okay, I sobbed reading this book, but in a good way. It's such a well-written description of what it feels like to be in your 20s. So our main character is Maddie, and she lives in London. She's got a mother who lives in Ghana and a father with Parkinson's who she lives with and takes care of pretty much by herself. There is a caretaker that helps her, but the burden is really on her. She's unhappy with work. She doesn't have a boyfriend or even really any friends because her life is really dominated by taking care of her father. Her mother comes back to London and tells her she can basically live her own life, that she's going to take care of her father. So Maddie finds an apartment with a couple of girls she doesn't know and tries to live a normal 20s life. There are some really sad parts in this book, but there are also some really hopeful and parts that really stuck with me, remembering what it was like to be in my 20s. I feel like everyone thinks their 20s are going to be the best decade of their life. Your 20s is really hard. You're figuring out who you are in your career, who you are just as a person, relationships, friendships. This book was fantastic. I will definitely read more by Jessica George, and I think this is going to be one of my best books of the year. The next book I read in April was Wayward by Amelia Hart. This is magical realism, and it's also a little bit of historical fiction because there are 3 different timelines. Our first timeline is 2019, and then we have one in 1619 and one in 1942. Before I give you the description of this, here are some content warnings. There is on-page sexual assault. There's on-page domestic violence. There's an on-page abortion. and it's not like a modern time one in which it's safe. And I think that's everything. But there are some very rough topics in this book, so definitely check out, just consider that if you are going to read it. That being said, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. So we start in 2019, and our narrator is Kate, and she is fleeing London in the middle of the night, getting away from her abusive partner. And she's going to a cottage that her great aunt left her in like the countryside in England, hoping that she can be safe there. Our next timeline, Alpha, in 1619, is awaiting her trial for witchcraft. And then our last timeline is 1942, and it's Violet. And she's growing up in like a very posh estate in London and doesn't fit in at all and feels like she has to suppress who she is to live there. There's a lot of magic in this. It has my favorite cover of the year, maybe ever. And I did really enjoy this. I've been on a magical realism kick lately, which you'll see in the rest of my wrap up. But if you like magical realism, especially like in historicals, read this. Amelia Hart did such a good job at making all three plot lines very intriguing, and like you couldn't wait to find out what was happening with all of them. Great job. The thunder is rumbling, but let's keep going. Next, I read The Heiress at Sea. There's water coming in my ceiling! Okay, the plant has been moved to catch the water. We have a door right there, and sometimes water comes in through the door, so that's what's happening. I'm going to finish this wrap-up if it's the last thing I do. The Heiress at Sea by Christy Caldwell. It's historical romance. We have Cassia, a lady, who is a spinster, and she just wants to get out of the drawing room. She dresses up like a teenage boy, boards a boat that she believes is captained by her brother's best friend, and everything will be fine until they're out at sea and she realizes that she boarded the wrong boat, and a lot of these men do not want her on the boat. There's a great captain named Nathaniel, though, who's going to take care of her. I really enjoyed this. To be honest, the heat level was way lower than normal. It's kind of fade to black, but I still loved it because it was such a swoony romance story that I didn't really mind that there wasn't that much spice. Great read. The next one I read was also a romance, and it is A Daring Arrangement by Joanna Shupe. And this is a Gilded Age one, so you're like in fancy New York times. And in this one, Lady Honora has been sent to New York after being caught in a compromising position with an artist. What a life. And her father has sent her there to live with her aunt and uncle and find a suitable husband. So she decides to find the most unsuitable husband she can imagine so that her father calls her back. Enter Julius, who is newly wealthy and kind of has a reputation of being like a wild man. And she makes a deal with him. She's like, hey, let's have a fake relationship, be my fiance, and we'll get my dad to bring me home, and you can meet a bunch of wealthy people, which is what he's really wanted to do. Of course, that's not going to happen. They're going to develop real feelings. It was such a good, fun, historical romance read. It's not my favorite Joanna Shupe, but I really enjoyed it nonetheless, and I'm reading the second one of the series in April. The next book I read took me on a wild ride, and it was The Ice Queen by Alice Hoffman. This is magical realism. I said I was on a magical realism kick. This book was crazy because at 50%, I was worried I was going to DNF it. And then I read one more chapter, couldn't put it down, read the rest of the book that night, and cried hysterically for maybe the last 30-ish pages. This is about a woman who her wishes come true. And she wishes for something really bad when she's a kid, and it happens. And then when she's an adult, she really just like is not connecting with life, and she wishes to be struck by lightning. And she is, but she survives. The best part of the story wasn't even about her. You got to stick with it to the second half. You'll be crying so hard in like a good way. I mean, in like a very cathartic way. It's really sad, but really beautiful. Alice Hoffman, you're such a good writer. You really are. Okay, on to the Kindle books I read on vacation. First, I read My Song's Curse by Poppy Minix. It was an ebook, so here's the cover. And I really liked this. This is a fantasy romance with like Greek mythology. And I love Greek mythology. And so in this one, we have Lula, and she's a siren. But it's not fun being a siren. You cannot speak in front of humans because they're just enthralled by the sound of her voice. So she has to be really careful whatever she says in public. And if she's around a certain human for too long, it can like make them go insane. So she one night is walking and is kind of like accosted by a gang, but is able to tell them what to do. And this man notices her, and she's trying to tell him to go away, and he won't go away. And it's because he's a demigod. So her voice doesn't work on him. And they have sparks flying, but there is a big rule that demigods and sirens are not allowed to be together. So here's the thing about this book. I was enjoying this book a lot. I thought it was good. And then at 50%, I was like, I can't put this book down. The end was so good, and I can't wait to read the next book. It's a duology, so it was really fun. And it's very much like a true Greek mythology romance. The gods act like gods. Olympus is a real place. It's not really like, it doesn't have that like retelling flavor where like stuff's different. You feel like you're reading a romance set in Greek mythology. It is modern time though. Great read. And the last book I read on vacation was The Barbarian's Mate in the Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I got an ARC because they're doing the new covers. I loved this book. So the book before I read in the series, the last, I think it was like book 4 and this is book 5, I didn't love, and I was kind of like, eh. But then this book, I knew Heaving Bosoms, which is one of my favorite podcasts, had done it. So I'd already listened to it. I knew the whole plot, and I was like, I'm going to read this one. First of all, this is the best one in the series so far, in my opinion. I loved it. You have a great enemies to lovers plot, and there's a ton of action. I think the Ice Planet Barbarian books do really well when there's a lot of like peril going on, and this one had a ton, and I very much enjoyed it. We've got Josie and Hayden, and Josie's been dying to resonate with someone because she really wants to be a mom, but she had an IUD, and then suddenly one day her body just ejects her IUD. Which is so gross and like terrifying. And but then she resonates with Hayden, who she hates. And so she's like trying to fight her resonance. I really enjoyed this one. I mean, read it as a standalone. It was funny. It was fun. It was action-y. Definitely loved it. Now I'm excited. I'm like reinvigorated in the series. It was a blast. Oh my gosh, thank you for sticking with me with like the rumbly thunder, the water coming out of my ceiling. It's raining so hard right now. My front yard is flooded and I live on top of a hill. And my sister texted me a couple minutes ago when I was paused because of that and said that her basement is flooded. She lives in my neighborhood. So I'm not looking forward to going down in my basement and see what's going on, but I better go do that. I hope wherever you are in the world this April, you're having just like nice April showers and not April severe thunderstorms. If you're still hanging out, thank you so much for watching this video, and throw me a storm cloud emoji in the comments. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.